Let's dive into their first album, which came out in 2000, which was Hybrid Theory. I have it saved and pulled up for everyone who's watching us live. That is. There were quick backstory. I'll let Kyle do a lot of help me out in here in a second. But some of the singles released were really good, and other tracks in the album too that stood out are really good too. But I'm gonna let Kyle go first. So, Kyle, what's your take on their debut album, Hybrid Theory?
Yeah, this one is very, like I said in my opening, they're very nostalgic for me. This is really, like many people, probably most people, their introduction to Linkin Park. Even younger fans today, this is really their entry point. The singles on this, a lot of times, I'm one of those people that I hear the singles on an album, and then I dive into the album and I'm like, oh, why'd they choose those as singles? Not with this one. I think they really did insanely well selecting the singles from this album. I don't think they could have picked any better ones. My one criticism to start with is that it holds up very well. Songwriting wise, music wise, like instrumentally, it holds up very well. Better than a lot of new metal from the time and a little bit earlier does. Where it does sound dated though, the production a bit, but again, I find that with a lot of new metal from that time, is it production wise, it does sound very dated. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all. It's just something that noticeable when you go back and listen to it. It's honestly one of the top three, in my opinion, debut albums of all time. It's insanely rare for a band or artist to put out an album of this quality as their first album. It really doesn't happen very often. The really only other two I could think of off the top of my head, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction and Boston's first album. Outside of that, it's very rare for this to happen. And yeah, I mean, that's in terms of initial thoughts on this album, that's where I'm at.
Mike, where you at?
Yeah, actually, this album felt really fresh and just kind of brought that kind of just, I don't know, that feeling of aggression and kind of like, and grow as a kid growing up, I kind of hated the tracks that were like mostly rap. Like I would start off as like the rap. I don't even think of his name. The guy in the band who's the main, vocalist who raps. Like I always hated those
Mike Shinoda.
tracks. Yeah, Mike Shinoda. That's his name. Thank you. My name is Mike. I should have known this. But yeah, like I felt like this album did a very good job of having a good pacing and the spacing of those types of tracks, and I mean, just very memorable songs. One Step Closer is my favorite Linkin Park song of their entire discography. So it's always been the song I would always be, in an argument with someone, oh, Linkin Park's not heavy, or they're not, they're just kind of posers or whatever. It always kind of served as like an anthem to that if Linkin Park wants to, they can bring the heavy. Yeah, it just has such great songs. I, more than you guys, I'm sure, became beaten to death by replay songs over and over again on the radio. In 2000, I was like heading towards 17, 18 years old. So I was used to hearing the same songs over and over, and it can kind of hurt an album's kind of replayability sometimes when you've heard those songs so much. Like Crawling was one of the most replayed songs, I think, like next to In the End, of course, but like Once It Closer, not so much. Like it was like it definitely was like beaten. I've beaten in my head over. So I sometimes it was harder for me to listen to certain songs on this album after hearing it in the year that it was released, and again and again and again. But like coming back to it, it still holds up. And I find these has a lot of songs that really stay with you and kind of like have a lasting impression, and a good mixture. I think that's a good word I have here. A good mixture of the rap and the rock and the new metal influence. More new metal influences on this than any of their upcoming releases.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is probably the last album that has some of those sounds in it. So that's an important kind of evolution or movement towards a certain style and maturity in songwriting, I guess you could say. So yeah.
Now, do you guys remember the early days of YouTube where crawling was just associated with all the animated music videos that people would make?
Yeah,
I think we've all watched quite a few of those ones.
100%.
Hundreds of times on that, hundreds of times.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
sure.
For me personally, as again, diving into Linkin Park's discography, starting with their first album, I recognize a lot more songs than I thought I did, that I remember, I should say. Because I mean, being young enough to remember, oh, like In the End would be on the radio and the opening piano intro. I'm like, oh, it's that song, right? And then, but Crawling as well, I was like, oh my god, that's that song that I can't get. I couldn't remember what it was called for all these years. And I was like, oh, that's right. And One Step Closer, I thought was great. Paper Cut, all the singles are fantastic. And I agree with Kyle. This is, as far as a debut album goes, I definitely put it up there for sure. In the top 5. I mean, personally, top 5. Because you mentioned Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. You mentioned Boston's debut. You mentioned this one. I would also throw Pearl Jam's 10 in the mix personally, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time. But I definitely agree. This is definitely a hard-hitting. It sold 27 million copies worldwide. It's certified 12 platinum. This is their debut album. It's a pretty darn good record if it's selling that much still to this day. And the streaming numbers are off the charts. In the end, it's reached over 1 billion streams on Spotify. Check that out today just before we started.
They got a couple songs in the billion mark.
Yeah, which
I listened to them when they were 0, guys. I'm just kidding.
Mike was 0. That's right.
I'm just kidding. I had no clue they were even called 0 before.
Oh, really?
No, it's all good.
Yeah, I had no clue. Yeah. So.
No, but like I said, for a debut album and kind of just kicking off their career, I would say it was definitely a great start to their career. I mean, you definitely see there is all you hear all the elements of the genres there, of new metal, of rap metal, alternative metal, rap rock, alternative rock. You hear all those blends all together perfectly on this record, and it is a really solid record. But should we get into the track listing a little bit or no?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Hold on. For those of you who are listening, just you won't be able to see this, but let's talk about this for a second. So the original release had 12 songs, and they're all written by at least the band or a couple of the people involved as well. So we'll get into the track listing right here. Paper Cut, One Step Closer, With You, Points of Authority, Crawling, Runaway, By Myself, In the End, A Place for My Head, Forgotten, Cure for the Itch, and Pushing Me Away. What are some takeaways for you guys? Kyle, let's start with you.
Yeah. So where to start? So I'll start with my top songs. I'll start there. No particular order, just the ones that really stand out to me the most: Paper Cut, One Step Closer, In the End, and Place for My Head. I think Place for My Head is the one song that I think could have been a single if they wanted to do another one. I really like that song. So as a common theme that we'll see going forward from here, a lot of my favorite aspects of Linkin Park, a lot of my favorite moments are Mike Shinoda's rapping. I find he adds a lot to it. He's a big part of what makes them unique in a way. Because you had the other new metal acts that incorporated rapping a little bit, like Limp Bizkit, all them. But Mike did it. I think he was definitely the most technically skilled rapper doing it in the genre. He mixes the sounds very well. I think he is really the driving force behind the band. And so, that's going to be something we see a lot, is his impact in the songs. Like, especially, I think it shines the most on this album, in A Place for My Head. Now, I'm going to go into parts of it that I don't like as much, because we touched on a lot of the positives. This album was perfect for, getting it when you're younger, getting into music. It's very angsty. It's very aggressive to the point a lot of the songs I find myself nowadays not being able to relate to, specifically Crawling. Crawling now, going back to it, revisiting it, yeah, it's catchy, but going back to it, I'm more like cringing at the lyrics a little bit. They're a little too angsty and emo for me. But I do think and they did this shortly before Chester's death, they would play it as a piano ballad live. And I think that it really put a fresh take on it. And to me, that's the version I go to more now. But I mean, other than that, it's great. Like I said, some of it does feel a bit dated. Specifically for me, the three like low points of the album, which I'm saying low points, but they're by any standards, they're a good song. Like it's only a low point in terms of what I expect from Linkin Park and just sonically in terms of production. With You never really did much for me. Forgotten, it's Forgotten starts off very good, starts off very aggressive. I feel like a lot of it just kind of gets forgettable. And Runaway is probably my least favorite. Other than that, like I said, any other band would be lucky to put out a song that good. But in terms of what I gotta pick out some songs I don't like as much, and that's what I would go with.
Mike, what do you got?
So it's what I love about this album is it doesn't have too many other kinds of theatrical elements. It's just straightforward, like, just in your face, like here's the rhythm, here's the beat, here's the riff, and it's just unapologetic. And like I agree with Kyle, like it's youthful to almost to a fault, that it kind of is making a statement, even if that statement is angsty and kind of cringy. And it doesn't apologize. It doesn't need to impress you with any kind of, hey, we're trying to be older than we appear or like more diverse than we appear. It was just a straightforward. A lot of the songs have a similar kind of sound and aggression, and like like you don't hear too many songs with like the in the end kind of style. You don't hear too many songs with the one step closer. Like a lot of the songs like have their own kind. They all have their own kind of sound, and they're straightforward. Just kind of here's in your face. And I'm kind of opposite of Kyle. I actually growing up and still to this day, I like the songs that blended Mike Shinoda's rapping with the metal, and found a kind of a comfort kind of like agreement when one of them fell out of place. Well, I guess I'm lying here. I always favor the rock and metal taking the reins, but when I felt they were the most like themselves when they found that perfect balance. If they did all the metal and then the harder stuff, they wouldn't be Linkin Park anymore. They'd just be trying to kind of like imitate some of the sounds coming from the bands that they've kind of grew up listening to and were trying to kind of draw some influence from. So it was like a perfect unity of that rapping style and the turntables and the stuff that they were doing in this kind of genre with the metal and the new metal and the rap rock kind of side. So I mean, in the end, it's such a great song still to this day. I could listen to that and remember how many good times I had listening to that, no matter where I was. Some of the most catchy, kinds of points of the album. Some of the ending songs really, I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember growing up. And not that they were bad. It was just as a kid growing up, I'd play the first, like 5 or 6, 7 songs, and then everything else, I would just beat those songs to death, and everything else would just kind of, it would give me the feeling of like that the band showcased their what's to come, some of the kind of sounds that they were bringing. So, I mean, like I said, One Step Closer is one of my favorite songs. Somewhere in there is in the end of their entire discography, and just they were definitely drawing some influences and creating original sound that they were kind of leading towards in upcoming albums.
So the thing for me is that, like, when I look at this track listing, I agree with. I don't want to repeat too much because we're pretty much on the same page here. But as far as like the singles that got released, I tend to go back. If I were to go back to any of them, I would say I go back to the singles that got released. I also throw Runaway in there as well. Personally, like Mike said, the first 7 or 8 songs are just killer. They're really, really, really great. As far as the tracks 9, 10, 11, and 12, they're still really, really, really good. But they just get kind of like what Mike said. They kind of get forgotten about. I'm not trying to rip off track 10, but they get forgotten about because the other tracks are just that good. And that's the way I feel about this record. Truthfully, is that, like, the first, when I was listening to it for the first time through a day or two ago, because I finished listening to it today. The first like 7 or 8 songs are killer, which they're really, really awesome. But when I look back at, when I flash back to when I was listening to the other day to get ready for our stream today, for the tracks 9 through 12, they don't resonate as much as much as like I thought they would. You know what I mean? Because I'm listening to the whole album, I think, oh, I want to remember this track or that track or this track. But for me personally, the first 8 tracks are awesome, and that's not a slur to tracks 9 through 12, like I said. But these are just all around incredible songs, and it shows how good this was released 22 years ago. It still holds up today as far as production goes. In my eyes, production and quality goes. But the question is, this is Mike's first time doing this too. Where does this rank on your Linkin Park list? Kyle, what do you got?
This one sits at number 3 for me.
Oh my God.
Number 3.
Okay.
Yep.
You had me really worried for a second.
I'm over here waving them off. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I have a flare in my hand. It's like Jurassic Park, the
I
dinosaurs.
gotta put it at number 3. It's such a good debut album, but I think that there's things that they've done after this that I think just beat it out a little bit more for that, number 1 or 2 spot. Like I said, some of it just kind of does sound a little dated. And I agree with what Mike said too, where it's definitely youthful to a fault at points, just because as I've gotten older, I've just started to drift more away from this album and more into their more mature works. So yeah, I got to put it at number 3.
Mike, what do you got?
This is my number 2 album right here, man. This is
Wow,
definitely
okay.
the nostalgic qualities of it, the roughness of it, the rough and it's good roughness, like straightforward, like pound you in the face songs, but then it's got its maturity side. It's got its the best of both worlds. I definitely feel like it is one of those kinds of albums that I feel like I can't put at the complete top because like Kyle said, it's kind of the establishment of who they were, and there's some stuff that they did later on that I felt like was a better blend rather than just kind of like the one note they were striking with some of the other songs, obviously, to the gems that kind of shine out here. So like, the ones that shine out where they have a perfect blending of everything, it's like unique. Like in the end, I feel like it's like one of those kind of songs where you're like, this song almost could have ended up on the next album. Like it almost feels like it was the perfect balance of what their sound was heading towards. And and that's kind of an interesting thing where you can take that kind of song and move it from another album and say, wow, this almost feels like something that they were heading towards. So yeah, it's definitely sitting on that second area for me. Just the good things to come. And sure.
So for me personally, I have it at number 1 for a few reasons. Number 1, because if I were to go back to any of the albums as a whole, I would go back to this one personally. That's me. Maybe that's my inner youth coming out and saying, oh, just go back to your nostalgia. I don't know, whatever, right? But
I knew his background was telling us something. Damn it, I should have paid attention.
Exactly, Mike. Exactly. That is 100% why I chose this as my number one. No, but honestly, like there's something about debut albums in general that I like, and like whether it be like we talked about Appetite for Destruction for a sec, or even Van Halen's debut we talked about for a sec too. At one point, Kyle and I did. But there's something about, to me personally, when an artist comes out and they establish who they are with that first record, like whether it be the 10 songs, the 9 songs, the 12 songs, that really define who they are and take you on a journey through the listener's life and their lives as well. So for me personally, that is my number one. Hybrid Theory is my number one for many reasons more, but we have only so much time to get to the rest of the albums too. But let's jump over. So far so good.